Hi, this is Paula, and this is the Common Book Show. And I'm here today with Richard and the unknown guest.
Hello.
Is that what we call you?
Yeah.
And of course, my son Tom on drums. And James. James is right there. I see him. I see his smiling face somewhere south of Philadelphia. Okay. So the thing I wanted to talk about initially to open up the show is this book that I just got finished listening to on Libby, which I like to talk about all the time because you too can go on Libby if you have a library card and listen to and read all the books your little heart desires. This is called The Soul of America, and it's by John Meacham. He's a brilliant historian, and he wrote this book during the Trump administration, and which this, we were saying we were fighting for the soul of America, and he kind of describes what he sees as the soul of America through the eyes of the historical perspective of American history. He doesn't only talk about slavery and African Americans coming here and being enslaved. He talks about women's rights, and he also talks a little bit at the end about gender rights and things like that. So he really covers the gamut. He talks about what different presidents thought of different issues, how they got legislation passed, what the people who didn't want the legislation passed thought. He also talks about this diehard 30% of Americans who are always on the side of the he calls, he uses the words from Lincoln, which are, are better angels, right? Lincoln used that. He said that the better angels generally went out over time, but there's this 30% of people who are constantly trying to work against doing the right thing because it's a change that they can't wrap their heads around, mostly either because of education or just extreme prejudice,
Do you blame that 30%, or do you blame the people who manipulate the 30% into thinking that way?
Well, they're not thinking for themselves, if that's what you mean. And they're made to be afraid of losing what little they have. They're usually the people who either have a lot to lose or very little that they can lose. They're led to believe that there's a limited amount of resources, and if they don't get their share, if somebody comes in from someplace else, if let's say somebody comes in from an Arab country or from Mexico, or even one of our own citizens who happens to be not the same color or the same religion, they don't want those people getting more than them, and they'll even manipulate them, these higher powers, into thinking that the labor unions are bad because they're not good for the people, the higher powers, because they say, well, why are those people getting all the breaks? Well, because they're, it's the only reason, and I've said this on the show before, the only reason we have an 8-hour workday and a 5-day work week is because of the labor unions. We'd still be working 12-hour days, 6 days a week, if it wasn't for labor unions. And that's everybody, even if you're not covered by a labor union now, because that became the norm. And children aren't working in mines and factories. So, but they twist it. And these people don't have the capacity, because of our educational system, to think critically and realize that they're being manipulated. So yeah, but it's so funny that it's always this 30%.
What about the other 70%?
The other 70% isn't necessarily all. They're not going to all agree with you and me. They're not going to be necessarily liberals, but they're going to be people who are not so easily bought.
But he's coming from a left-wing perspective, right?
Meacham?
Yeah.
Meacham is, yeah, he's a liberal, but he's not like a screaming liberal.
No, but he's saying like the 30% are conservative and confused. What about, could there be 30% of liberals who are also manipulated and confused?
Of course, there's
You know what I mean?
there's a lot of
It's-
people who are, but liberals tend to be more open-minded, and usually better educated,
Yeah.
and that's the difference. So yeah, there's a lot of people. There's some young people that are getting into the political realm right now who don't understand the compromise it takes in order to pass legislation. They just think you can march in there and say, we're going to do this, and you can't. You see how at least how it doesn't work. You see how our government doesn't work right now, and they have these ideas that all you have to do, you can't. We're a democracy. You can't just march in and say this is how it's going to be. We're not an autocracy, hopefully ever. But. So to answer your question, yes, I blame the people who are manipulating from that position of power. They want those people to believe that so that they can remain in power and remain rich and unchecked. I mean, that's something that you have been very cognizant of. You're looking at consumerism all the time and capitalism. So. I mean, what does our lovely James think about all this? I know you usually have some different opinions than what we have. I want to hear from you, James.
Really now? And what exactly do you want me to comment on?
Well, what is your perspective on this 30%? Do you find this 30% to be what are your thoughts about that?
I'm not sure I really have any thoughts about that. The 30% of what now?
Well, okay, so dissenters against doing against policies that would make everyone in America equal,
Or more
Well,
progressive?
or more progressive policies.
Well, you can't really do that. You can give people equality of possibility, but you can't give them equality of outcome.
Or ability.
No, you can. I agree with that, but the thing is, you can create a level playing ground. You can create a more level playing ground in order for people to become successful, and we haven't done that.
Well, I think that the problem has more to do with the fact that there's no level playing field on starting things on your own. If it were possible to just start your own business doing X, Y, and Z, as opposed to needing to have somebody hire you to do that job for some
Right.
corporate entity, then a lot of this inequality would disappear, because if I can do the job well enough, I'm going to get paid for it in the open market.
Right.
But we don't have an open market in the United States. And in fact, the electrolysis industry is a very good example of that, because some states have licenses and some states don't.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when a state goes licensed is that the current practitioners get grandfathered in and are granted a license, but anybody else who wants to join the profession in that state needs to do whatever hoops that they've set up for you to jump through,
Like,
which means paying a lot of money, going to do coursework. But what happens is there's only one or two places in the entire state where you can do this coursework.
mm-hmm.
And so if you're in, say, Vermont or New Hampshire, fine, you can drive the entire state, in a matter of no time at all. I mean, we're talking about a trip to Niagara Falls or the Galleria. But
Yeah.
if you're in, say, California, there's a school in San Diego and there's a school near San Francisco. If you live anywhere else, you're out of luck.
Yeah. So I mean, in that case, I see your point, but I think one of the things that's creating the unequal situation is because property ownership is the main driver of wealth creation, and there's been such a discrepancy about where people of color are able to purchase property and build that wealth for future generations, and that's the start of it, and therefore can't make improvements. I mean, you can't pay rent your whole life and make and start building any wealth. So I'm saying, I know what you're saying from that point of view, because there are all these restrictions and these laws that they make that will be good for some and not take into account other people's skill sets that they're already there. They could get their license. Just give me my license. I know how to do this. But in general, the bigger picture.
That's more my point, is that you can't just do what you know how to do. For instance, I have decades worth of experience doing what I do, and some people will tell you I do it better than most anybody who does this.
Yeah.
But I can't. But this, for instance, the state of California says that I can't work in the state of California because I don't have a California license.
Right.
Which they keep changing the rules on who can even get one.
Yeah.
So in 1987, I could have paid $50, taken a test, and gotten a California license.
Mm-hmm.
In 2023, I can't get a California license without going to a California school, even though I have decades of experience
Right.
in the industry and could probably teach the actual course. So it is an uneven thing, because you can't just do what you know how to do and let the market decide.
Yeah, that's true. So let's kind of slip out of this and
Well, I just wanted to say
Yeah.
this. One of the reasons why Black people can't buy properties in certain areas is because they can't get financing. But
Yeah.
you wouldn't need financing if you could actually make enough money to buy stuff cash.
Yeah, but it's hard to make that much money when you're paying rent, exorbitant rents, to people who don't give a shit about your ability to buy property. So
Well, of course not.
So
And the point is, mortgages cost less than rent, but the bank won't give you a mortgage.
Right. Yeah, I know, and that's where we're running into problems with now the diminishing middle class. I've never been middle class, so I don't have to worry about that. I'll never attain middle class. What can I say? All right, Richard, let's go to something on your list, because we haven't done one of these in a while, and I know your list must be growing.
Do you ever hear the expression that when you are comfortable with someone, you can sit down with them and no words have to be spoken?
Yeah.
You've both heard that? Look at this cartoon. I wonder if this is a compliment or if this is a negative critique.
Okay.
Not having ever been married, I can only guess, but
We will look at when we don't go out to eat that often, but when we do, we'll sit and we'll like motion over to look. Does people they don't talk to each other when there's, I mean, you're sitting across from the table from someone and you're eating, and yet you're not communicating, and that to me is not a good sign of a good relationship of any kind, marriage, friendship, dating, anything. I can't imagine being in that situation where you're silent with the, I mean, even the people who are on their phones. I mean, sometimes I think they might be texting each other back and forth, but I'm not sure. No, I think that's definitely, it was an aptly named restaurant for this very common thing you see in restaurants all the time. People silently sitting across from each other and eating.
Or looking at their phones now. I mean, that's a whole other story.
Yeah, that's a whole another story, but still, it's the same thing. You have something to distract yourself besides your food. You don't have anything to say. James, would you go on if you're on a date with somebody and they don't talk to you? Isn't that a very uncomfortable situation?
I wouldn't say uncomfortable, but it's kind of the norm. In fact, I just had a date, I think 2 weeks ago, and the thing that I found remarkable was the fact that the woman did not look at her phone once the entire time we were together.
Wow. Well, that's good. Did she talk to you, though?
Oh, yes. we spent 3 hours together, and we did a whole lot of talking.
Oh, good. That sounds like a...
Which is why it was amazing that she did not look at her phone in 3 hours.
Wow. Well, that sounds like a good date.
It was.
Yeah, I'm very okay, but yes, if you are friends with someone and you just sit in the room together and you don't talk, that's not. I mean, in the act of eating, dining and conversing, I think that's a different thing than just being able to sit quietly with a friend without talking.
When you talk about the silence between two people and understanding each other, I think more of a working relationship, like two people who have worked together for a long time, and they have a communication that is nonverbal. The other person can know what the other person intends right away, and they work together very smoothly. And two carpenters or whatever it might be. You develop a rapport and a relation, or possibly in education. You have a special education teacher in a classroom and the regular ed teacher, and they work together so smoothly they don't have to speak about it.
Yeah,
so,
that's a good point.
You develop a bond of understanding, a mutual understanding after years of doing the same thing together, that it's almost like a code that you just automatically, right?
Or not
and
only,
that could be in a marriage too. Couldn't it be?
Yes, but I don't get the same impression from people sitting across the table.
No, not the dead silence
but,
restaurant.
Okay, there are some things. For instance, if a stranger walked into the room right now, and was acting erratically, I could look at you or you could look at me, and we'd both know what we were thinking. Basically, we would have communication on that level because we've known each other for a long time. Now, I don't know if I could do that. I mean, you can even do that sometimes with a stranger. Like you're sitting there and all of a sudden something weird happens and you look at them and you both know that you've noticed it and you've had that moment. But so that same type of communication.
But also, James, and I'm glad you had such a rewarding 3-hour conversational date. That's terrific. But I think when you have a relationship with someone that is very deep over a long period of time, you can sit comfortably without talking. Whereas if it's somebody that you just met or you don't know very well, that's a very intimidating thing. Like, geez, because you start to have an internal dialogue. Why didn't she speak, or why didn't he speak, or what should I say, or are they looking at me funny, or did I do something stupid? You don't have any of those thoughts when you know someone really well and you have a bond.
I've just never felt that when I see two people, like they're not. It's not like they look like they're having fun or they're enjoying their food so much that they don't need to talk. It's usually that there's a distance between them that's wider than
that's
the table.
irrevocable. Well, I don't know if you ever saw, and this is short, I don't know if you ever saw the Buster Keaton movie College. It's a masterpiece. The last 3 shots of the movie are astonishing because it's about Buster Keaton as a young man, and he wants to impress this girl, and he does all these incredible athletic stunts, and she falls in love with him, and they get married, and it's great. And then there's 3 shots, 3 or 4 shots. There's their wedding, and they're very happy. Their honeymoon, they're very happy. The next shot, you see them eating dinner. The next shot, they're arguing. And the next shot, tombstone. So it's like marriage, misery, and death. That's what a relationship turns out to do.
Nice.
You know, you love each other. It's an illusion,
You
and then
don't
you
have to-
find out you hate each other
You know,
and you
that's
die.
it's just like
And that's-
anything else. You
that's
don't have to continue. If it's that miserable, you don't have to continue. As somebody who has been in relationships that didn't work, you can leave.
Yeah, you can.
You're
yeah.
allowed to leave.
Although sometimes it's not easy. Like, I mean, there are people who get into relationships that are what's that word? Codependency, right? And it's hard.
Most people.
It's hard to do
most
that.
people get into codependence.
it's-
And not only that, you build a whole cadre of friends together.
That's true
And
too.
then
yeah.
when you leave those, you know, and families, and I've kept people's families and gotten rid of them because
Okay,
you know,
I can understand.
they weren't working.
Yeah.
You know.
Too bad you didn't meet the family first. And
Yeah. Well, you know, there were some points where the family became the relationship, and the guy was just an adjunct. You know, but you know, that's when you know it's time to go. Don't you
Yeah.
have any more sons? I would say. I like the family. I don't like
not
him.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so I think it's a complicated that cartoon can be complicated. The idea that somebody's sitting. I don't know. I've never seen a couple that would make eye contact and be eating, and it would look like they were having a good time without talking. I've mostly seen this. You know.
It's
You
like
know.
all the sunshine went out of them. You know, all the.
Yeah, there's no more life force there.
Yeah.
That relationship has lost its life force.
They got to turn to the sunshine.
On that
Saw
point-
this guy with plants, and he said, one thing about the plants in my apartment on YouTube, he said, look at the plants. And he said, look at the back, these beautiful leafy plants. And he said, the part that's facing the sun is like, yeah, that's the side you want to look at because it's like open. But he said the back is kind of like this. And it really did
It
look like a
does.
back.
It
and he
is.
said, when you turn them around, he said, that's the part of you I want to see. I don't want to see your back. And he was kind of talking to
Yeah,
the plants.
yeah.
But he said, maybe
But
that's,
then it
there's a
changes.
metaphor in that.
Yeah.
Like if we face the sun, we want to face the sunshine
Yeah.
light instead of focusing on all these dark thoughts and negativity. I don't know if I'm articulating that correctly,
Yeah.
but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, I
There's
can,
a beauty in that somewhere.
Yeah, I know. I do. I have to turn my plants all the time because they start getting that way. You know, like
Yeah,
crunched
yeah.
up, and then I turn them around, and then they do it the other way, and then I
Right.
keep turning them so that they get sun on all the sides. But yeah, that could be an interesting metaphor for
Mental health. or-
mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I speaking of mental health, I got a hard copy of this book that I started listening to on Libby once again. This book is it's remarkable for anybody who feels that they're in a psychological place where they feel stuck. They feel like something is stuck. And, you know, you've had like maybe, I mean, everybody's had something in their childhood or their adolescence that's been disturbing, that's maybe just stuck in their gray matter and they can't remove it. And with this book, he does give, it's just looking at what he's saying and how it's affecting your health and your mental health and your physical health, and helping you to observe your behavior, stop reacting and start responding. You know, like if somebody says something to you and it hits a nerve, you're more likely to say, "What the hell are you talking
Yeah,
about?"
Yeah.
Instead of saying,
Just being aware of it.
why, first stopping and saying, why did he say that? And then what could have happened to this person that makes him treat me like this or be like this? And then respond with something, you know, not saying that you would ignore it. You would say, I'm curious at why you felt that why you responded to me that way. I'm
Yeah.
curious about, and that you can start a dialogue and maybe change something.
Yeah.
And he talks so much about that, and I know I'm a reactive person, and then
I think most of us are, because it's hardwired into us.
And
Like you
it's
said
like
before,
the-
that deep
the-
part
the
of your
lizard
brain, the
brain,
lizard
yeah.
part of your brain.
before it gets
Yeah.
up to the part where you're actually
Yeah.
thinking.
It's funny how synchronicity sometimes happens, because working on that course, the section of notes I just finished is all on the structure of the brain, and
Yeah.
it's very, very detailed, and that's one of the things that we're going to
know.
be studying. That deep down primal part of your instinctive
Yeah, and the
react
and the,
to-
fi-
and
the
fight or flight.
The
Yeah.
one thing I think might be important to go over with the kids is that that part of your brain in the front that processes excitement and
the prefrontal cortex.
prefrontal cortex is not really connected to the part of the brain that is good at decision making until they're almost 30
25,
years old.
30, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, well into your 20s
And
at
that
least. Yeah.
explains the erratic and dangerous behavior
Yeah.
of teenagers and young adults.
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't. It's always like, oh, well, they don't think of the repercussions of their actions because they haven't had enough life experience. But it's not only that; the brain is not actually connected that way yet. It's a developmental issue.
They've also found that certain addictive behaviors that release high amounts of dopamine into your head hijack the reward circuitry and your ability to make decisions in the prefrontal cortex, so it weakens that part of the brain. So somebody who has a serious addiction is prone to make a series of bad decisions in their life than someone
Right.
whose part of the brain is clear thinking.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
That
we're-
makes sense.
It
but
does make
yeah.
sense, and of course, drugs and alcohol are not good for the brain.
Period. Yeah. Anyway,
You
yeah,
know,
that's
they're-
another
they're-
story.
they're-
Yeah.
They damage your brain, but
But even over things like over shopping.
oh yeah, no, any
Okay.
kind
or,
of addiction.
Or I gotta check my Jim Prey. No, I shouldn't pick on Jim. You just said that he loves his phone, and I'm not. Sorry, Jim. I'm just kidding around. But if we're always on our phone, right? And
Yeah,
that's there's a reward that you get out of it, and that
but it's not only
hijacks
it's,
your
and
circuitry.
it's also sexual behavior.
Pornography or
not only-
sexual
yes,
addiction
sexual
or
addiction,
any of that stuff.
And it goes into food addiction, anything that gives you that rush of dopamine or other chemicals that your brain is expecting wants, and it's
and becomes to need after a
but
while.
because this is what
almost.
he's saying, it's like if you're not seen and heard and honored as a child, you don't get that. Then you find other ways to get that stimulation, to get that feeling of
Yeah.
being accepted, and you latch on to something else. I started drinking when I was 13 years old.
Yeah, I did the same thing around the same time. And so that explains a lot about our childhoods, which were in some ways similar in the fact that
Right.
both of us had certain trauma.
Yeah.
And we used negative coping mechanisms, right?
Well,
to deal with
and
it?
we also looked for we looked for people who would accept us, and we would take anyone.
Yeah.
Excuse me. We would take anyone, and that's what happens when you don't have a sense of that in your childhood. You look for your tribe, and you find them. You find them with the weirdest people. But anyway, so what are you? So you're doing a lot of reading in psychology right
I
now.
am, yeah. Every day. So I get up 5 o'clock in the morning, go right to work. As soon as I get to work, I hit it. It's kind of nice because I don't have a first period class.
Oh, that's right, because you're in school
And
now.
I'm in school now.
Yeah.
So when school starts classes start at 7 a.m. So I'm there at 6:30, and I start going right away. And I have first period off, which is nice, and then I have a study hall, which is nice. So the first 2 periods of the day, I can
You can
really work
prepare,
on
yeah.
preparation and writing notes and things like that.
Yeah, so
But-
you've only been in school
2 weeks.
Oh, 2 weeks.
This is the third week.
How are
Monday.
the kids responding?
Wonderful. And I was I had this cloud, a
you
storm
didn't know
cloud
what to
over my head
expect.
because I did. How am I going to teach this class? And now I really did, and Richard knows this. I did a lot of preparation, and I really worked hard to get notes and materials ready for them. But I still didn't know how I was going to approach it. And it's funny, once I started to teach and I got in front of the students, it became kind of almost like a stand-up comic. Yeah, in a way, because you respond to the students, right?
Right.
It isn't just the dry information. There's people in front of you. And as I'm looking at these kids, and this is the significant thing, it's not beginning, I knew this already, but they have concerns. They're there. I asked them how many people took this course because maybe you have some problems that you want to work out, and almost everybody's hand went up.
Wow, they were willing to share that.
They
That's
were,
pretty good.
yeah. You know,
Yeah.
and so I feel like I do have a responsibility to them, and some of them expressed to me that they want to go into this as a profession.
Wow.
So I said, well, okay, I can do this. What I'll do is I promise those of you who are going to do it as a profession, I'm going to be as thorough and detailed, and even at a college level, because I'm using AP material for the course, but I'm also not going to make the tests so difficult that those who are here for
Just-
more personal reasons
Yeah.
are going to be intimidated,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I feel there's a sort of a happy medium.
Yeah, as long as you're
And-
covering the stuff that you
and-
need to cover for
And not to belabor this, but
Yeah.
it's all that's been on my mind. Like I'm at the grocery store and I'm thinking about what can I do to bring this to the class, or what unique thing could perspective, or it'll come to me in the car.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about it all the time,
yeah,
different ways, or watching videos.
Well, that's
right now I'm
very-
studying Freud, for example.
That's a really
so
dynamic way of approaching it. You know,
Yeah.
that makes it really interesting for the class. Plus, it's fresh for you, so now it's exciting for them because there's a freshness you're bringing to
we're
this.
learning it
this
together,
coursework.
essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. It's pretty cool. So, list.
Okay. Here's another cartoon.
You've
Ready?
been collecting cartoons. Okay.
I love cartoons.
Yeah.
Sally, will you make me the happiest man in the world and accept full responsibility if I should fail to be the happiest man in the world?
Yeah, that's a classic. It's the really honestly, you don't need two half people in a relationship. You need two whole people.
Very well said.
You know, and that guy's looking outside of himself for happiness. I posted something on Facebook a long time ago, and there was this little cartoon character holding the word happiness, just holding it in their hand, and somebody walked up to him and said, "Where did you get that? I've been looking for it all my life." And the guy said, "I made it myself." You know, so that to me is what you have to do. You have to be happy yourself. You are responsible for your own happiness.
What are your thoughts on that cartoon, James?
Where's
My thought is, and of course, this wouldn't actually be said, because what really happens is, will you make me the happiest woman and take responsibility for anything that I'm not happy with?
That's the wrong woman. Don't go out with her. Don't.
The problem is, she's not that when you actually get with her, but she can become that at any time.
Oh, I don't know. You know what? Yes, people do tend to pretend there's something else until, it's too late. But you don't want. You got to try to get. You have to be honest enough with the woman, so that she feels she can be honest enough with you about what she needs and what she wants. I mean, there was a story. There's a short story. I think it's called "The Big Blonde." And this woman is she's a good sport. She's what is known as a good sport. It was written I think in the 40s or 50s.
Excuse me.
I'm trying to think. I think it was maybe Dorothy Parker wrote this. I don't know. If you look up the Big Blonde, you'll probably find out who wrote the story. And she's happy-go-lucky, and she's so happy to be with this guy, and she's alive, and but she's putting on an act because she wants someone to love her, and then once she's in the marriage, she lets down her, Dorothy Parker. She lets down her her defense mechanisms,
persona.
and she shows the man that she's got sadness, and he rejects her, and he moves on. He used to be a good sport, he says. You used to be so much fun, and now you're and instead of giving her succor, he leaves.
In other words, he didn't marry the real person in his mind. He married somebody else. He married a mythological character. And when he found out who she really
Right.
was,
Right, but
Beautiful.
it's
Right.
as much her fault as it. Well, it wasn't really. I mean, he wanted a party girl. He wanted to have fun. That's all he wanted. He didn't want that deep relationship, and she saw that, and she was able to give him that until she felt comfortable enough to say, "I'm sad. I have issues. I need support." And he didn't want to do that because that's not who he married. So I mean, it's a really good story. It's really well written. Dorothy Parker's amazing.
Can I repeat the Rita Hayworth quote?
Sure.
Rita, why were you married 5 times? Well, it's very simple. Most of the men I knew went to bed with Gilda and woke up with me.
and there you go. They married a fictional character.
Yeah,
That's right.
that's right.
But I think men and women both do that.
Yeah.
Everybody's guilty of either putting on a mask or misreading people.
All right.
And,
The one relationship I had in high school, the bane of my life. This relationship was horrible. I was abused for years. The guy, I saw him. I was in high school. I was on the bus going to school, and I saw him standing on the corner. And this was in the late spring before school ended. And I saw him there, and I just fell in love with him. He was like this brooding kind of athlete. He had his athletic jacket on, and he had a full mustache. He was in high school. And I looked at him, and I built a character
Yeah.
out of who he was. And when I did finally get to meet this guy, and he was an asshole, I couldn't shake the character I built in my head. I kept thinking I was doing something wrong, and that's why he was
acting like
the way
his real self, which you
the
didn't
way he
realize.
was. So this happens in relationships all the time, and because I believed in that character I created in my head, and nobody in the world could have ever lived up to that character either. But this guy just happened to be a giant asshole. But the thing is, we do it. We all do it. We all see somebody, and there's Tom Strohs. He tends to look at beautiful women and think because they're beautiful that they're angelic, and he doesn't stop to think that they might be beautiful and nasty, that's because not all beautiful people are beautiful inside. So we all do it. We all create characters.
It comes back to identity.
Yeah.
I was watching an interview with Carl Jung. It's like this 3-hour interview, and he talks about, that's why I use the word persona, and he talks about that same thing. He said, one of the problems is we might not be the same person at work as we are at home. Mm-hmm. And when there's a disconnect, there's a dissonance there, it creates a neurosis in a person, and then I'm not going to belabor this, but our old friend Aaron Barry did a video that is one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen in my entire life, called Who Am I? Who Are You? And it's like 40 minutes long, and it's 3 parts, like 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. And he just talks about, who are you? Who am I? And he does this performance thing, and he goes through all this Jungian psychology. It's fucking brilliant. It is one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my life.
Is it available on YouTube?
Yes, it is. It is fantastic, and it's so true. And a lot of the things he says some crazy things sometimes, but he is dead on with this thing. It's absolutely fabulous.
It's called. Look.
It's. Can you find it, Richard? Just so I know what to call it, so Paula can find it.
Sure.
Just.
Okay.
You'll have to look up Awakened Brave, because I don't think he goes by his own name.
So I go to YouTube,
Yeah.
And then I do a search for.
Just Awake and Brave, and then it's one of his latest videos that he posted. It's actually an older video that he
Awake
reposted.
and Brave.
Awakened, like awake, woke up.
Awakened. Okay.
Awakened. A-W-A-K. No, it's not him. Not and. Awakened.
Awakened.
One
like
word.
I have awakened.
Yes. Yeah.
That is, see,
No,
Awakened.
awake. No, that's not it. You have to back up. Try it again.
No, that's awake and.
That's
we're
not
looking
him.
for awakened.
Awakened Brave. Not Awake and Brave.
Oh, you mean change the
Awakened.
change the search.
There you go. Awake and Brave. Down. There it is. I think that's it. Yeah, okay. Just click.
the Awakened.
Yeah, the
Brave.
Awake and Brave. So click on that, and that's probably the website. Okay, go to the videos. Yeah, that's
Okay.
it. Go to the videos.
Oh, he looks like a kook.
No, he's yeah, he does, but it's this. Okay, keep going. Keep going. Keep going. It's a 3-part. There it is. Identity crisis. You got to go to part 1 first. It is that one. That's it. Who am I? It is one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen in my life. It's astonishing.
See, all right, I will.
And it's a great. Unfortunately, the video quality is not as good as most of his videos, but
That's okay. I'll check
it's-
it out.
What he says is really, really smart.
Okay, I'll check it out. I'm always interested in seeing something new.
And it's kind of funny too, because he gets sort of crazy with it.
He
and-
looks crazy.
and he is
That's
a little.
why-
He is a little nuts.
He looks.
He lives sort of off the grid, and he collects mushrooms, wild mushrooms, and forages for food, and he just lives a very off.
How did you find this guy?
I found him online when I was just doing all this personal development stuff about 8 or 9 years ago, and Richard and I developed a sort of a, would you say, relationship with him in terms of conversing and doing podcasts, and I did a podcast with him
Sanford
one
started
time.
writing to him.
Yeah.
What do you think about this guy?
I think he's worth checking out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I will.
I would check
He
him
looks hyper macho,
He's-
and it scares me a little.
He's a very interesting person. That's all I can say. He's a
All right.
really fascinating.
I'll check it out. I'm open to it.
This is an older video. This is about 5 or 6
Yeah,
years
I'm
ago,
open
but
to
it's
When Aaron and I were writing to each other back and forth,
Mm-hmm.
a lot. Like,
yeah, we had a difference of opinion because he said he would travel to Africa and that there are people in every village that he went to who would offer their young daughter for sex. And he felt that he was doing a good deed by having sex with these younger people because he was giving their family money.
This guy?
Yeah.
not underage. Not underage. I don't believe they were underage.
Yeah.
He was giving by giving them money, he was giving their family money, and he was doing a good deed.
Yeah, I can't see it that way, but
But don't allow that to prejudice you against what he says,
all right.
because it's really, I swear to you, it's one of the most brilliant things I've
I'm
ever
gonna watch
heard
it.
in my life.
I don't need any
Yeah.
convincing. I'm going to watch it. I find, yeah. So James, you know about this guy?
Never heard of him.
Okay. All right, then you have no opinion on him.
Aaron Barry. Aaron Barry is his name.
Aaron Barry. Okay.
Yeah.
So you had a correspondence with him for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't.
And you know why it broke down? Because he did not like the written word.
Oh, he's more of that. That's why he does these.
He kept saying to me, "Let's go on my show and talk about
That's
this."
right. Yeah.
Oh,
And I said, "I prefer it this way. Well, that way he can't interrupt me." you
Yeah.
know? And that,
Yeah, I know.
that kind of bothered him.
He's pretty. I've seen him do. He did a podcast with me, which you saw, and I've seen him do a lot of others interviews, and he doesn't interrupt people.
Oh.
He's a good listener.
that's good. He looks a little scary.
Since then, he's been arrested,
Oh, well.
beating up a woman.
Oh, well. I mean, I'm still going to watch this thing. But I try to stay away from hyper masculine types. They make me uncomfortable.
Hey, there is an aspect of that in his personality, but
Yeah.
not all the time. Again, you'll see. You can judge for yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
You got a problem with equal rights and lefts?
I have known, I have the character that your character was based. Oh, I didn't tell you, James. I told you that I based the character Al in Sweet Jesus after one of my best friends, Al, the part you played, and he died. I just found out he died.
Who died?
My friend he was a character. Al was he was a fugitive from the law for the past since the 80s. So
That long?
yeah. So he was, and I'd lost touch with him in the 90s because we had a falling out that and well, it was, I don't want to discuss what happened, but I didn't talk to him for many years, and then all of a sudden I started thinking about him, like, you know, we hadn't talked to each other. I wasn't sure if he was still living in South America. I wasn't sure where he was, and then out of the blue, my first boyfriend, who was Gloria's brother, called me and said, "Hey, I just found out from Nick that Al's dead." And he's been dead, you know, for a couple years. He died of a heart attack. So I didn't know any details, but Nick had found out from Al's brother Peter, and Peter worked at this gas station, and I went there and left a note for him to call me, and he did. And turns out that Al had gotten a fake identity that he was able to use and live in the States for the last 6 years.
That's amazing.
He was living in Pennsylvania.
I don't want to ask what his crime was, but I'm
It was
assuming
it was drug trafficking.
Okay.
Cocaine trafficking.
Okay.
Yeah, he's
so
gone
he would
now.
have he would have done some serious time
Yeah,
had they.
and it was at the
caught up
time.
with
It
him.
was at the time when the war on drugs was really big, and they
Yeah.
were looking to make
An example.
an example of him. And I mean, he'd been doing illegal stuff since he was in high school. He was a paper boy, right? And as soon as he found out he could make more money selling illegal football cards, you know, he started doing that. And we didn't know they were illegal. I used to take him to school. I went to Catholic school. I used to sell these football cards for him in school, and he was making tons of money. And then he started selling drugs, and he got a nest egg from somebody, and he was paying them dividends somebody that didn't even do drugs, paying them every couple weeks, giving him money, a cut. And he started selling pot, and then he started selling other things, and he was always involved in something nefarious. He just was that
Yeah.
type of guy.
I hate to maybe I mean I don't know him, and I'm kind of glad he got away with it. Not because I promote drug dealing,
me.
but would society really be served, and would he be served? Would he become a better human being if he spent time in prison?
No,
You
he
know?
was he was
I mean,
he was born
it-
he was born to break the law. This was a man who was born to break the law.
Mm.
I find he just had he was very smart, and he did not use his power for good. He just
Yeah.
never did.
Sort of
But-
his destiny, if
but
such a
he
thing
was
exists.
he was one of my best friends growing up, and
Yeah.
I had a loyalty to him for many years because I had kind of my moral compass was a little skewed too from where I grew up and what I
Yeah.
grew up with and how my background. I didn't think of what he was doing as illegal because we didn't think of drugs as illegal. It was just something you do and you can't get caught.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain. I mean, now I have a better understanding of what was going on and why I should have not associated with him. But he was my friend from the time we were like 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah, well, it's just like you're telling me before about finding security in any way that you could, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about
Yeah.
the Gabor Mate book.
Yeah. So he was
One of those friends.
He was a friend. He was always he helped me move when I left my husband.
Oh.
And I had to sneak out. I had to while he was at work. But this is the brainwashing part. While he was at work, I moved all my stuff out, but I left him dinner on the table.
Wow. So there was still a part of you that was
Because I
committed
was
to that.
well, not committed, but that was I have
Your
to
responsibility.
My responsibility as a wife. I have to have dinner on the table. He comes home, there's dinner on the table, and everything's
Yeah.
gone.
But you were committed to that idea of being a wife, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I know it's ridiculous, but anyway, he was my friend for many years, and now he's gone, and I wish I would have had a chance to talk to him just to tell him that I have gotten past what happened and that I'm over it. So that would have been nice to have done that, but I can't now. So I can just send it off into the ether. But so yeah. So your character.
What's wrong with having left? What's wrong with having left your husband dinner?
What's wrong with leaving him dinner? Nothing. I just took everything else. I just, I mean, I left all the stuff we had bought together as a couple. I didn't take anything that I took my bedroom set because it had come from my house. I took, my clothes. I took my daughter and her stuff. I took, everything that belonged to me, and I left everything else. And the kitchen table, my mother and his mother chipped in for, and I thought I should leave him the kitchen table, and I did. But
Well, that's a fair thing. After all, guys get left and they still pay the mortgage.
well, there was no mortgage. It was just we were married only a few months. It wasn't like I couldn't figure out how to be a wife and a mother at the same time. I just didn't have enough gray matter for that. So I was.
Do you know the story of
So it was Hollywood
Timothy?
marriage.
Pardon me?
So it was a Hollywood marriage.
Oh yeah, Hollywood. Yeah, it was a Lovejoy marriage. I don't know about Hollywood.
Story of Timothy and who?
Timothy Leary's wife.
No, I don't know anything about that.
So he's a Harvard professor,
Uh-huh.
and he's married.
Yeah.
Nice suburban home, right?
Uh-huh.
LSD.
And he starts doing research with LSD and mental illness. Okay,
Mhm.
and then he starts to realize that his research is telling him that this is more than just for mentally ill people.
Mm-hmm.
And then his popularity in the national press started
Yeah.
to take off. And he had a graduate student working with him, and he started having an affair with her.
Mm-hmm.
His wife found out about it.
Mm-hmm.
She told him about it. He said, "Don't worry, there's nothing to it. It's not what you think it is. You're misinterpreting it."
Mm.
But she got more and more reports from people saying that this is something that she should look into.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to the point where she couldn't handle it anymore. And he woke up one morning in bed with her, and there was a note on her pillow. And the note said, "Timothy, if you go and look in the garage, you will see that I closed the door and I started up the engine so that I could die through carbon monoxide.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry that I had to do this on your birthday."
I know somebody else who killed themselves on their husband's birthday. Go ahead.
However, if you look on the kitchen table, you'll see I've put out a birthday cake for you.
Wow. Same
Wow.
concept.
Wow. Did she die?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I wondered, when I heard that story, how did he mentally bounce back from that?
Yeah, she was.
What a thing to put
Yeah.
on.
Well, she did it deliberately. I mean,
I-
it was,
I
I'm
fe-
glad it's your birthday and enjoy it, sucker. You're going to suffer for the rest
Well,
of your life.
that's-
Doesn't it send that message?
To
Yeah.
me, that's, I think, why she
Like,
did it.
I'm going to
Yeah.
do everything I can to hurt you.
Yeah. It's
the-
obvious to
the
me,
thing
but-
the thing is, though, it's not his fault that she killed herself. She could have left that relationship.
That's right. Not everybody kills themselves when their husband cheats on them. You don't have to do that.
She is responsible. The thing is, she made that decision that she was going to do that, but it's not his fault. People don't cause that. The person is having. It's a personal psychological problem that the person has.
Mm-hmm.
She did not. She chose to kill herself. It wasn't because he was having an affair. It was because she was she had a mental problem. Nobody is responsible for somebody else committing suicide. I mean, this is something I had to, my friend, I used to work with this amazing, hilarious woman at Children's Hospital, and she was married to this really funny guy, and I really liked them as a couple. And she had mental health issues, and she did the same thing. She killed herself on his birthday. He was having a hard time dealing with a wife who was depressed and having, these breakdowns, and she wouldn't seek help. And so he did end up, I don't know if he was going to this woman. I don't know if he was having an affair with her or not, but he needed some support, some emotional support, and she killed herself, and it was the same thing, and he had to deal with that, and it was a really painful episode. I mean, but she was a really funny woman, but she had mental health issues. I don't. Nobody is responsible for another person's suicide. I cannot stress that enough, because everybody has the freedom to leave that relationship, no matter how she felt about him. We have to get on with our lives.
Yeah, people have autonomy. It was her
Yeah.
decision. I just wonder and hope that and hope that he had the presence of mind and the wisdom to internalize that, or if, like Richard says, how do you bounce back from something
Yeah,
like that?
it is.
'Cause that's easier said than done, right?
No,
Don't let it bother you.
Oh no, from a distance, it's easy to say that, but
Yeah.
when it's the
Yeah.
person,
When it's your wife or
yeah,
somebody you cared about.
yeah,
So when I read that in his biography, it colored every other kind of crazy thing he did in his life
Yeah.
for me,
In what way?
He was traumatized by that.
oh,
So
yeah.
so you mean his behavior, which was wacky,
Yeah,
might
right.
help?
Had
It
been
might
a
help
respo-
account
in
for why he
response,
behaved
yeah,
that way.
in response to that.
I see.
That situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I because there are so many. I've had conversations with people who say I can't leave my husband or my wife because they'll kill themselves. They've got that weight because the person tells them that.
Yeah.
If you leave me, I'll kill myself. And that's a very unkind and unfair thing to put on
It's a
someone.
lot. It's a lot of weight.
And it's hard. It's hard having a relationship with somebody who's mentally ill. Was this a bark?
It sounded like a dog.
Did you just sneeze? Tom? It sounded like a small dog barking. What is the sound of a small dog barking? Okay, we've got only 2 minutes left.
Oh, can I show a cartoon I'd like to get James's interpretation of?
Sure.
Okay. Let's see here. When I saw this, I thought, oh, this is a great cartoon that James would probably have a lot to say on. It's a vending machine. Here, is that it? Let's see here. Facebook is not an easy way to save cartoons, I'll tell you that.
No.
Somebody wrote to me this week and said that she thought poetry was something that mattered a lot to me. Oh, here it is. Okay. Check this out. There are all these men in the voting machine, in the
Vending
vending
machine.
machine, and the woman comes up and presses a button, and all that comes out is the man's heart.
Purchasing love.
Yeah, what's it mean, James?
James, I leave this one to you because I don't get it.
Yeah, it's not clear to me.
What's your interpretation there, buddy?
Well, it's going.
What's going on? The stairway to heaven. It's like,
Did we lose?
See, they're censoring me.
You got 34 seconds. We want to hear your interpretation.
Well, it's just going on the misnomer that women want money. I mean, women want love, and so she's just taking, what she wants and leaving
No,
the rest of the men.
I think she was disappointed.
Interesting.
I don't know. I think she's disappointed that she didn't get the body parts. I mean, there's got to be something to hang on to.
Instead of just a heart.
It's a little esoteric for me. I couldn't. That wouldn't work for me.
And we disagree.